So, as I've mentioned before, we are coming to sort of the end of the year. And to be honest, I'm not going to lie, a lot of my content, probably from now, and certainly for the next, certainly talk about March, April, is going to be a lot of talking about essentially the economic performance of the year 2022 in the UK. We know trade numbers are down. We saw certainly this week about how much revenue has been lost by the government because we have seen the economy being damaged, because trade and export is down, which obviously means the government can take in less tax money from those economic movements. This ultimately is very bad for the UK. Not only that, we are seeing businesses who, because of Brexit, are now having to wear almost, think of them as like, Brexit weights tied around their ankles. So they are now less competitive than European businesses who are now even more agile and able to outmaneuver them. This is not good for British businesses. And this goes all the way back to 2016 because we were warning, if you do Brexit, in fact, Adam Posen, I think, was the guy. I may be wrong. Adam Posen, I think, was one of the original guys who was talking about this initially, but I think many people were. Certainly from an economic and financial view of Brexit, is if you do this, then the UK becomes far, far more vulnerable to sort of fluctuations in the economy or international events because you are not tied to the big ship that is the EU, which is far, far, far more able to weather many economic storms. And guess what? We're seeing that. We're seeing this with the countries recovering from COVID. We've been incredibly slow to recover from COVID compared to other countries of comparable sizes and comparable economics. We've been far slower in that regard. And then you've got to look at the war in Ukraine, the effects that that has had on economies. If you just focus in Europe, certainly it has a massive effect on a lot of economies. It's had a bigger effect on ours. So this was always warned about. And I think this is one of the things we really have to get across, that look, Brexit was essentially someone going up to the British economy with a massive sort of nail and chisel and just going wham straight into the British economy. And the problem is, until we remove that massive spike that is Brexit, we really cannot fix the cracks or even the hole that Brexit has caused in the British economy. So, as always, we said, before we go jumping into this, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And of course, there is the YouTube thank you button down below as well. And of course, the Pony Club as well, should you like to join the YouTube subscription thing that we've got as well. So, as always, guys, like I say, please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button if you are new. And of course, do remember to ring the bell so that you get notifications when we post a new video or when we go live as well. So, as always, guys, like I say, thank you very much for all those people who do help and support the channel. And of course, on with today's stuff. So, this comes from CNN with the title of Brexit Has Cracked Britain's Economic Foundations. And oh boy, it has certainly done that. So, it's been 2 years since former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson signed his Brexit trade deal and triumphantly declared that Britain would be prosperous, dynamic, and contented. What? Wow. I mean, it's unbelievable to say Boris Johnson said that 2 years ago. And all those three, words describe as not even true. That's for certainly. That's for sure. But anyway, we continue. So after completing its exit from the European Union, the deal that would enable UK companies to, quote, do even more business with the European Union, according to Johnson, would leave Britain free to strike trade deals around the world, continuing to export seamlessly to the EU market of over 450 million consumers. Again, when you look at Brexit, in purely like business and economic terms, you've got 450 million customers on your doorstep with free and frictionless trade versus doing trade deals which don't necessarily remove trade barriers. Which business, right, from that business sense is better? But anyway, back to it. So in reality, Brexit has hobbled the UK economy, which remains the only member of the G7, the group of advanced economies, which includes Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the United States, with an economy smaller than it was before the pandemic. And remember, France, Germany, Italy, those are three countries within the EU. They seem to be doing really well. Now, they're not perfect economic wise, let's say that, but I'll tell you what, they're doing far better than us. Far better than us. The years of uncertainty over the future trading relationship with the European Union, Britain's largest trading partner, has damaged business investment, in which in the third quarter was 8% below pre-pandemic levels, despite a UK-EU trade deal being in place for nearly 2 years. So, as we've always said, Brexit would make the UK a far less attractive place for businesses to come invest. And guess what? We're seeing those numbers. But then again, I suppose that's just Project Fear, right, guys? That's just Project Fear. When you've got the actual physical numbers in there. But anyway, the pound has taken a beating, making imports more expensive. So it's now, again, one of the big supposed benefits of Brexit was that, oh, it wouldn't matter because we'd be able to import all this stuff. Well, imports are now more expensive because the pound has taken such a beating. Again, disproving yet another falsehood that was promoted by the Brexiteers and the Leave campaign back in 2016. So the pound has taken a beating, making imports more expensive and, of course, stoking inflation, while failing to boost exports, even as other parts of the world have enjoyed a post-pandemic trade boom. And I have to wonder whether soon we are going to see the true numbers of what that has actually meant, where we've had and we have seen that post-pandemic trade boom with other countries throughout the world, and yet Britain and the UK is going to be left behind. How much in terms of that is going to be sort of lost money that could have gone into the economy, but also revenue that the government could have taken in? So Brexit has erected many trade barriers for UK businesses and foreign companies that used Britain as a European base. Again, one of the big reasons to remain. Britain was forecasted and sold to people, to foreign investors, as an amazing European base to be in. Base your company in Britain and you can export to the rest of Europe. That's not the case now anymore. And how do you, I don't even know, to be honest, how certainly the international sort of business secretaries and international trade secretaries are even selling the Britain anymore. I don't even know how they're justifying selling it to the world anymore. I would love to know what that is, but we'll probably see sooner or later what that is. It has been weighing on its imports and exports, and of course, sapping investment and continuing to its labor shortages. All this has exacerbated the inflation problem, hurting workers and, of course, the business community. The most plausible reason as to why Britain is doing comparatively worse than other comparable countries is Brexit, according to L. Alan Winters, the co-director for the Centre of Inclusive Trade Policy at the University of Sussex. And the sense of gloom hanging over the UK economy is captured by its striking workers, who are now walking out in ever larger numbers over pay and conditions as the worst inflation in decades eats into their wages. At the same time, the government is cutting spending and hiking taxes to fill the hole in its budget. While Brexit isn't the cause of Britain's cost of living crisis, it has made the problem more difficult to solve. This is it, what we were talking about at the start. Brexit was never a solution to the UK's problems. What was always going to happen, as we said, was it was going to make problems in the UK even worse. It is going to be the foot on the accelerator. And there are many problems in the UK that we had, even pre 2016, but Brexit was not the solution to them. If anything, doing Brexit has made a lot of these problems even worse and even more difficult to actually solve. So back to it. So the UK chose Brexit in a referendum, but the government can then chose a particularly hard form of Brexit, which maximised the economic cost. Michael Saunders, a senior advisor at the UK economics and a former Bank of England official, said that any hope for an economic upside from Brexit is pretty much gone. I think that's a quote, I think, right there. Former official of the Bank of England, senior advisor to Oxford Economics. Any hope of an economic upside from Brexit pretty much gone. I don't know what else you expect me to say to a quote like that. I think it sums up Brexit, really. So, although Britain voted to leave the European Union in June of 2016, its exit from the single market and custom union was finalised on the 24th of December 2020, when two sides finally agreed to a free trade deal. The deal, known as the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, came into effect on the 1st of January 2021. It eliminated tariffs on most goods, but introduced a raft of non-tariff barriers such as border controls, customs checks, import duties, health inspections on plant and animal products. And before Brexit, a farmer in Kent could ship a truckload of potatoes to Paris just as easily as they might send it to London. These days are no more. And I think we've talked about this before, about how many companies, not only just farmers, but hundreds of companies in the UK, were able to send goods as easily as the example points out, to anywhere, to Paris, to Germany, to Berlin, to Amsterdam, easily enough, as if they were sending it to London. And we have seen that through the past 2 years, whenever we've talked about a company experiencing Brexit problems. Oh, I've lost my international, business audience, or my customers that I would sell to. So now I've lost hundreds of thousands of pounds. How can I expand my business? What do I do? Oh, just sell to, export to other countries like Brazil or wherever. The government would obviously say, engage in these emerging markets. But that's not easy. It's not easy to do. And we've explained that in other videos why that isn't easy to do, because we could do an entire video. We have done entire videos on just that issue. So back to it. So we hear stories every single day from small businesses about the nightmare of forms, transportation, couriers, things getting stuck for weeks at a time. The epic length of the problems are just gobsmacking, says Michael Owens, the founder of Small Business Britain, in a campaign group. He says the way things have panned out in the last 2 years has been really bad for small businesses, Owens told CNN. Researchers at the London School of Economics estimated that the variety of UK products exported to the European Union declined by 30% during the first year of Brexit. They said this was likely because small exporters had exited the small EU markets. And think about that. If you take that away from the economy, that has a knock-on effect. But we warned about that, and oh, look. And here's a good example coming up. So take the example of Little Star, a UK company that makes jewelry for children. Its business took off in the Netherlands and had plans to expand to France and Germany next. But since Brexit, only 2 of the more of its 30 of its Dutch customers are prepared to handle the costs and paperwork to obtain stock from the company. So think about that. A company, massive, took off in the Netherlands, and now out of 30 of its Dutch customers that would take in those, how much loss of investment is that to companies, to that one company, Little Star? I'd never actually heard of the Little Star example before, but this is it. All these stories, just there's just so many, and businesses, as I've said before, businesses don't speak out about this. They should a lot more, and I wish they would speak out a lot more. But there you go. Anyway, it continues. These products that used to take 2 days to ship are now taking 3 weeks. That is a long time. While import duties and sales tax have made it much harder to compete with European jewelers, according to Rob Walker, who co-founded the business with his wife Vicky back in 2017. The company is now looking to the United States for growth opportunities. It's mad that we have to look to the other side of the Atlantic to do business because it's so difficult to do business with people 30 miles away, Walker said. The British Chamber of Commerce did a survey last month of more than 1,000 businesses and published it in reporting that over 77% said that Brexit has not helped them increase sales or grow their business. More than half said they were finding it difficult to adapt to the new rules for trading goods. Straight right construction suppliers, the manufacturer in Dorset, told the chamber that importing parts from the European Union to fix broken machines has become a costly and time-consuming nightmare. Again, another story that we've never heard about. Construction supplies company. It has become a time-consuming nightmare. Brexit has been the biggest ever imposition of bureaucracy on business, according to Starlight. Nova Dog Chews, a producer of snacks for canines, said it would have lost its EU trade had it not set up a base in the bloc. This has cost our business a huge amount of money, which could have been invested in the UK had it not been for Brexit, it added. A government spokesperson told CNN that the government's export services had provided exporters with the, quote, practical support on the implementation of the Brexit deal. And the deal is, quote, the world's largest zero tariff, zero quota free trade deal, the spokesperson added. Again, don't really think so. Again, fact check on that. Fact check on that. Definitely in aisle 4. The spokesperson added, it secures the UK market access to key service sectors and opens up new opportunities for UK businesses across the globe. Hasn't really at all. But, you keep on believing that. So, Britain will not easily replace what it has lost by trying to forfeit the unfettered access to the world's largest trading bloc. The only substantive new trade deals it has struck since exiting the European Union, which did not simply roll over the deals it's had as an EU member, have been with Australia and New Zealand. And by the government's own estimate, these will have a negligible impact on the UK economy, increasing GDP in the long run by just 0.1% and 0.03% respectively. By contrast, the Office for Budget Responsibility, which produces the economic forecasts for the government, expects Brexit to reduce Britain's output by 4% over the next 15 years compared to remaining in the bloc. Exports and imports are projected to be around 15% lower in the long run. The initial data has borne this out, and according to the OBR, in the fourth quarter of 2021, UK goods and export volumes to the European Union were 9% below 2019 levels, with imports from the European Union 18% lower, and goods exported to non-EU countries were 18% weaker in 2019. So even this supposed, we're going to be global Britain, we're going to trade to all these other countries, Even that's not working out. That's not even working out, which is really, I think, probably the most shocking number to take away from this. This whole thing of, oh, don't worry that we can't trade with Europe anymore because we'll trade with the rest of the world. Well, guess what? The numbers aren't panning out. I wonder why. Again, it's down to Brexit. The United Kingdom appears to become a less trade incentive economy, with the trade share of GDP falling 12% since 2019, 2.5 times more than any other G7 country, the OBR said in a March report. The decline in exports to non-EU countries could be a sign that UK businesses have become less competitive as they battle higher supply chain costs following Brexit. And according to June Dunn, an economics professor at Aston University Birmingham, had to say the UK's trading ability has been damaged permanently by Brexit, Dunn told CNN. This doesn't mean it can't recover, but it has been set back for a number of years. Research at the Centre for European Reform, the think tank, estimates that over the 18 months in June of 2022, the UK goods trade is 7% lower had it not been 7% lower than it would have been if Britain had remained in the European Union. Investment is 11% weaker, and GDP is 5.5% smaller than it would have been, costing the economy £40 billion in tax revenues annually. And this is another thing that I think people really haven't talked about, that all this stuff has led to less tax revenues. I mean, you do not see that argument being talked about. And I think this is something we should definitely be talking about next year, that because we aren't doing as much business with the EU, because even the global Britain is failing that we are taking in less tax revenue. And think about where that tax revenue could be going. It could be going to pay workers, all these strikers that are going on strike. 40 billion would be a lot of money that it could put into paying nurses. But of course, it can't, because our economy is being hit. It's being damaged by Brexit. And of course, this is enough to pay for 3/4 of the spending cuts and tax rises that UK Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt announced in November. Just think about that. £40 billion is enough to pay for 3/4 of the spending and tax rises that Jeremy Hunt announced back in November. The United Kingdom is projected to have one of the worst performing economies next year among developed nations. And the Organisations of Economic Cooperation and Development expects the UK economy to shrink by 0.4%, ahead of only sanctioned Russia. The GDP in Germany is forecast, of course, to be 0.3% smaller. The International Monetary Fund forecasts growth at just 0.3% for the UK GDP next year, ahead of only Germany, Italy, and Russia, which are expected to contract. Both institutions say that high inflation and rising interest rates will weigh on spending of consumers and businesses in Britain. And according to the Confederation of British Industry, a leading business group, the fall in private sector activity picked up pace back in December, but is now declined for 5 consecutive quarters. The downtrend looks set to deepen in 2023, the principal economist at the CBI, Martin Sudders, said in the statement, saying businesses continue to face a number of headwinds, with rising costs, labor shortages, and a weakening demand contributing to a very gloomy outlook for next year. It's not good. It's really, really not good. But this is what you can expect for the next couple of months. All this data, all this coming out. And I'll tell you now what should really be happening. So, certainly, all the pro European groups need to go on the attack with this data. They need to get this data, start collecting it, start putting it together, and they need to start putting in a way for people to understand it. So, like you had for the example there, oh, our economy is £40 billion off because of your bad Brexit deal, because businesses can't trade with the EU as easily before, because we are now less competitive. This, and again, that statistic that it would have paid for, what was it, 3/4? I think it was. Um, where were we? Yeah. So it would have paid for 3/4, that £44 billion. If we'd remained, we would have had that. And that would have paid for 3/4 of the spending cuts and the tax rises in the UK. That is a shocking number. And I think we really need to start getting across to people the economic impacts. And we need to start getting it away across to people who are, well, people who aren't economically literate, because you might say, um, you know, it's what, 0.5%, I think it was, lower GDP. Now, 0.5%, when you say that to people, that's not really a lot. 0.5% sounds like a very small amount, but in reality, you're talking billions of pounds. And a lot of people don't understand that. And I've said it very, very easily. When you're talking and trying to sort of get this across to people, it's really easy for people to get lost in the numbers, to just not understand like the sheer size and what this money can actually mean if it's being taken into the UK. That's where we need to start looking. And I think certainly this year, taking it to people on this. So we need to start looking at the numbers and simplifying it for people to understand, so that everyone can understand what is really going on with the UK economy and why Brexit is damaging the UK economy so much. That is what we need to take, certainly going into 2023. And that would be certainly my advice to all the pro European groups out there. So, as always, guys, like I say, thank you very much for watching. And of course, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a rotation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.